Starting with a heavy hitter, folks. Here we go. The Last of Us Part 2. By the way, this is a spoiler warning, spoiler alert. I don't think it's possible to talk about this game in the way that I want to without having spoilers. Unfortunately, I really thought about it, but I just don't think it can be done. As you can see, I have my Joel plaid gold on. I thought that would be appropriate, and we also have Captain Jack watching over us now. As this video is going to go along, we're going to lose the natural light, which is something that happens in The Last of Us quite a lot, both parts. So I thought it would be thematic. The Last of Us Part 2. Now, my experience with this game. I pre-ordered it and got it on release day and started playing it basically that evening. I had started to work or was going to start work, but I had a whole weekend free. So I was able to blast through basically the entirety of Ellie's half of the story in the weekend that I was the weekend that I had available. But then from there, I had started to work a bit more regularly. So with my job happening, I wasn't able to blast through Abby's part the way I wanted to. And it basically took it took probably over half the amount of time that I spent with Abby in the game, just getting over the fact that I wasn't with Ellie. Being like, nope, I don't care. I want to be with Ellie. I want to find out what's going on with Ellie. And the other thing on top of it is that it took double the amount of time that I spent with Ellie, figuratively, because I only spent a weekend playing as Ellie, whereas I spent, I believe, at least a week, if not more, playing as Abby. And so that really skewed my experience with the game, first of all. And this was my original playthrough, of course. But that is basically my experience. I was able to wrap it up in about 2.5 weeks. So, like I said, I have a job now, and the job just started, and kind of split my time with Ellie and Abby right as the job started. So that's my experience. Now, the context. And this is where it all gets a little hairy. This game comes out at a time where the world, I mean, we know what situation the world is in right now. The whole pandemic, everything else going on. So the game was delayed because it was not going to be available for everybody to purchase immediately, because all the pre-orders that happened, the physical copy pre-orders, which I unfortunately did not get. I thought about it, but then with the delay and with this news coming out that pre-orders of physical copies were not going to be met immediately with the initial release date, they were able to push it back a couple of months, tweak up a couple of things, and then I wanted to make sure that I got it on the release day, so I pre-ordered it on the PlayStation Store. This game was also met with a lot of studio backlash. There was a lot of clashing of animators and workers who left Naughty Dog kind of soon after Uncharted 4 and Uncharted Lost Legacy came out. A lot of animators and workers started to leave Naughty Dog because they were frustrated with the 12-hour shifts that were being demanded of them constantly, and this game in particular saw a bit of a crunch time. That made the making of the game, or that made the creation of the game, quite stressful for a lot of these animators. They felt like they weren't fair working hours. Like, it's, you usually work an 8-hour day. 8 to 10 hours. There are other industries that do work 12 hours. This was not acceptable to them. The crunch time, the level of stress, the expectation that was being put on them to create this fantastic, beautiful game in the period of time that it was being asked. There were some animators that actually came out and stated that they wanted this game to fail to orchestrate and to emphasize their feelings about being crunched and being overworked. They hoped that a message of this game not doing well with critics, with fans, which we'll get to that, they hoped that it would really make Naughty Dog think and figure out whether or not this is how they wanted to treat their employees. So that's that context. Now, I've watched a lot of other content that talks about that Neil Druckmann, the director, and some of the actors like Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, of course, have been talking about how they wanted this game to be received. And I think it lines up. Neil Druckmann wanted the audience to feel uncomfortable. I felt frustrated that I was still with Abby, that I was with Abby for as long as I was, up until the point where I kind of, sort of, finally started empathizing with her. But to a degree, I felt like Ellie was portrayed as a bit of a villain. But again, that was the point, as per Neil Druckmann, that they were wanting to illustrate Ellie as Abby's villain. Now, I felt that as I played as Ellie, I felt that some of the things I was doing as Ellie were somewhat villainous, to the point where I wasn't fully interested in doing them. But that is what Neil Druckmann wanted you to feel. He wanted you to feel the just pure gaping hole of loss that Joel leaves when he's taken out by Abby. They wanted you to feel this juxtaposition of you're with this character that all the fans know and love for so long, and then boom, you're swapped and you're thrown back into this Abby character that you played a little bit with at the beginning of the game, and you're now with Abby for 16 hours of gameplay. For some people, that journey might not be as interesting as maybe Ellie's, and to be frank, I felt the same for a large portion of Abby's journey, that I really didn't care. But that's how it was supposed to be, according to Mr. Druckmann and his co-writers and the actors who played these characters as well. Now for the storytelling, and this is from my perspective, from my education in film and storytelling, and I already got yelled at for the rule of thirds, which is there's 3 sections of the screen, and this section right here was not filled in my first video, so obviously I have tried to remedy that with Captain Sparrow. The storytelling method that is portrayed in this game is very much, here's everything from one block, here's everything from the next block, here's the final climax, and the conclusion. Now, I don't feel that this was necessarily the greatest way to go about this. I understand the empathy that's trying to be created around both Abby and Ellie throughout this game. I fully understand what they were going for. I just don't think it was the right method to bring in fans. I love the first game. That's why I'm wearing this shirt, because I know that in The Last of Us, the first one, there's a different shirt that you can wear. Joel wears a golden plaid shirt. For me, they set up this game at the beginning as a game that was going to be that was going to have 2 stories spliced together. That's how it starts. You start as Ellie, and then you play as Abby, and you come back as Ellie, but you don't know who Abby is, you don't know what she's doing, and then you kind of start to learn a little bit, and then you meet Joel as Abby. And for me, I was wondering whether you would have the choice to kill Joel, whether or not it would be made for you, or that you would do it as the player, that it would be an interaction. You know, you would have to press the prompt to kill Joel or something like that. I was still very distraught when Joel died, but there's, that kind of thought process of, could it have been done this way, a little bit differently, perhaps? And then it splits off into the 2 separate sections. Now, the idea of creating empathy means that you have to have a connection with that character to then empathize with them. And so many people, including myself, did not empathize with Abby for about, I'd say, half her adventure, because the whole time you're going, cool, where's Ellie? I want to hang out with Ellie again. Why aren't we still with Ellie? Why are we back with Abby? Why have we teleported back in time 3 days? Why do I, like, when it said Seattle Day 1, I thought we were going to get a little snippet, and then it was just going to carry on. And that's not what happened at all. And I was not okay with that, especially because, again, like, I was trying after when I would come home from work, when I was playing this game as Abby, I would try to get as far as I possibly could every day, and I was still with Abby. And I was like, why am I still with Abby? Why am I still with Abby? And it was that was my experience for the whole week. Why am I still with Abby? And I think that this is storytelling that, to Neil Druckmann, to the writers, to even the actors perhaps, to the creative team behind this game, felt that it was going to be impactful. And it certainly was impactful. Not in the way I think they wanted it to be, because of the reaction that has been out there. Visually, gameplay, this game is stunning. I think it's just about flawless. They brought in the new elements that they brought out for Uncharted 4, implemented the ones that they improved upon in Lost Legacy, and just made it this beautiful, stunning game with more challenging, more terrifying infected. They seem more foreboding in this game than they did in the first one. You're in tighter spaces. You feel almost cramped, and then you're sliding in between little areas. I can't even describe it. But you're just so hemmed in a lot of the time. But everything is smooth, visually stunning. You feel like you're in the world and that you're there. There's very little video game tropes about this video game. I would say the most gamey thing that happens is the dodge mechanism. Sometimes you'll find yourself dodging away from something that you very much wouldn't have been able to dodge in the way that you dodge, because oftentimes the dodge just gets kind of thrown back, and a lot of the time you're just kind of leaning back at somebody throwing a fist at you or like slamming down at you or something like that. And it's a good mechanic. I thought it was a very nice addition to the game, but it is a little video gamey, and I mean, that's what you're signing up for. And that leads me to my last section, my actual personal thoughts. Kind of alluded to some of them already. Anything else that I think is important? What I think is important, and there's a few points that I want to hit here. The first one is video gamey things that happen. There seems to be this level of expectation right now with the technology being as good as it is across gaming now, that video games aren't supposed to feel video gamey. I'm not quite sure I fully understand that. I mean, you know what you're signing up for, especially with this game. You're signing up for a story-driven, third-person shooter suspense thriller. They have significantly improved the gunplay from the first game, from the Uncharted series. Everything seems to be amped up to that extra level. And actually, the bow and arrow is a lot more difficult to use in this game. You actually have to gauge it. We're getting ominous now as the video comes to an end. My second point is to all the people who have been attacking the voice actress and the character model of Abby for not being female enough or being too butch, which is a horrible thing to say. I do not understand. This was not the actor's choice. This was not the choice of the character model, who was literally there for a day, and that was the end of that. I do not understand how you can go attack people simply because they might be the face of something that you don't like. These people are not they're not part of the decision-making process. If you want to be upset with people, be upset with the creators of the game. But that still doesn't mean you send death threats to these people that you're gonna, like, I have seen some despicable stuff. It's unacceptable, in my opinion. This is a work of art. This is something that was produced to the world. If you don't like it, that's great. I personally liked it, but I think there's a couple other things that I want to touch on about it. But that does not give you the right to go out and attack these people online. There's criticism, and then there's just death threats. It doesn't make any sense to me. Final few things. An additive to the context is they did effectively mislead the audience. The trailers are edited in a way that it shows Joel in scenes that he's not in, or it shows Joel in a younger or an older version of himself. The older version gets superimposed on the younger version of himself to seem like he's more involved in some flashbacks or something like that. I mean, there's the moment in the trailer where Ellie turns and goes, "What are you doing here?" And in the trailer, it's Joel, and it's like, whoa, that's amazing. And then in the game, you're obviously like, well, how is that going to happen? Because Joel's dead in the first 2 hours of gameplay. And that moment happens in the game, and it's Jesse. Nothing wrong with Jesse. I thought he was a great character. I was very disappointed that he just got his head blown off by Abby, just gone like that. That moment was totally ruined because of the way it was edited in the trailer. It's just not, it's not Joel. There's an expectation set, and it's not met. And I think this game suffered that for a lot of it. I think people expected to play as Ellie for the majority of the game. That expectation was not met. I think a lot of people expected Abby to die at the end of the game once they had gotten through the majority of it. That expectation was not met. That was the initial plan, that Abby was going to die. I felt that one of them needed to die. Whether it was Abby, whether it was Ellie, I don't mind. To me, this felt like there was something missing bridging the first game to the second game as well. Some other folks that I've watched have talked about it as well, where you have a second game much more heavily involved with Joel. A lot of the flashback sequences would be elaborated upon in that game, and you could learn about how this relationship between Ellie and Joel essentially fell apart while defending Jackson. Maybe something with the Fireflies crops up again. And then you go into this game, you introduce Abby in the second game as well, and then go into the third game with like Abby arriving at Jackson, and it's like boom, right? You for the whole game, you don't know why she's going to Jackson. You just learn all this other stuff about Abby. Wow, this character's kind of cool, but why are you're in the dark the whole time about who she is, what you're doing, where you're going, but there's this guy that you need to kill because this guy killed your dad, and you're like, oh yeah, let's go do that. And then this happens. There's a bit of an annoying amount of jump scares with the stalkers that are like stuck to the wall in growth, and you can look at them, and the first few jump out at you as you just walk by them, and you're like, oh my god. And then you can see them if you walk slowly, but they will still jump out at you even if you are looking straight at it and just creeping at it really slowly. It's still gonna jump out at you, and that was kind of annoying, I'm not gonna lie. This game is very good. It is a brutal experience in the sense of the story is brutal. It's not happy. There's not really any kind of relief from the bad. It just kind of keeps getting bad. It's not good. It's not whatever. But that is this game. The creators wanted it to be a brutal experience, which, by the way, they lied. They said you wouldn't have to kill a dog, and technically you did kill a dog. It was in a cutscene, and they prompted you to do it, and you had to do it, but you still killed a dog. It is possible to get through this game without killing any of the other dogs, even though I couldn't do it because they get on your scent, and then you have to figure out how to get them off, and it is frustrating. I also played this game on hard the first time round, and they succeeded in that. I think you do get empathy for Abby towards the end. Certainly by the point, Abby falls so far to the point where she is physically broken as well as mentally broken, I would say. There's basically nobody left for her other than Lev. Ellie is the same. These two are ultimately a reflection of each other at the end. At least Abby has Lev. Ellie doesn't appear to have anybody at the end, and it sucks. Now, I would like to see what happens next. I'd like to know if Ellie goes back to Jackson or not, if Dina decides to try and go find her, if Tommy has anything to do with that, who's a broken man as well by the end. One other thing that I think would have been really good to have in this game is the creators reference the level of PTSD, the struggle that Ellie goes through basically throughout this entire game, getting over or not being able to get over Joel's death. The PTSD that puts her through. She has one episode of PTSD in the epilogue, and that sparks her to go off and seek out Abby again. And I just don't feel like that was built upon enough. There's a lot of good, proactive human messages in this game. Basic human rights, self-expression, LGBTQ rights. I think one other thing that would have been good to bring to light is the struggle that people go through with PTSD. And I think if Ellie had had multiple episodes throughout the game dealing with the struggle of getting over or trying to work through Joel's death and struggling with that, you could have a moment where Ellie is fighting off a clicker and then suddenly it turns into Joel and he's screaming at her. And then Ellie has to stab Joel. And it's like a quick time interaction. Then you pull the knife out of it and it is just a clicker. And then Ellie has a bit of a breakdown because it's not just a one-off thing. It's a process. And I think that process or that struggle, that constant reminder needed to be there more. If you're going to take one thing out of this entire video, The Last of Us Part 2 is not as replayable as The Last of Us Part 1. That is my humble opinion about it. The story points that are made to be impactful, I don't think hit in the same way that the story points in the first game hit. I think the way every moment is structured in The Last of Us is perfect. And to have been able to replicate that in a second game, in a sequel, in the way that they wanted to make this game was impossible. And those are my thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2. Welcome to the end of the video. The light's all gone, and I forgot to do the thing. There we go. There's a little bit more light, but it's very ominous. Ominous like this game.